Do you want to play this without this? Well, you're in luck, because today we're going to go over just that in a deck tech I like to call Captain Ripley Vance. So without further ado, how about you sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Welcome back, folks, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for dropping by and your ongoing support. Today we have quite the deck tech to showcase to you all. Before we jump right into that, as always, a quick and special thanks to patrons like you for making videos like this possible. I must say, in the past several months, this list has grown smaller and smaller. So with that said, I will be reworking my Patreon in the coming weeks, and once I do, be sure to expect an announcement here on the channel. With that out of the way, we can finally jump right into today's video, which revolves around the commander Captain Ripley Vance. Coming in at 2 colors and 1 red mana, this 3/2 legendary creature human pirate reads, whenever you cast your 3rd spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Captain Ripley Vance. Then it deals damage equal to its power to any target. And now that you know the commander for today's deck tech, it should be mentioned that this entire list at the time of recording came out to $3.96. And this price does not take into consideration the price of shipping as well as basic lands. Nonetheless, this is a true budget list and not a clickbait video you'd see on YouTube. And although we are working with an extreme budget in this case, I still tried to retain the functionality of this list, as upon completion I looked and we can remove just about 5 cards and get the list under the $3 mark. However, unfortunately by doing so we would greatly decrease the power of the deck, so I decided to keep it as is.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
But either way, $3.96 for a full 100 card commander deck is an impressive feat. So with that out of the way, let's discuss, is this a deck for you? So first of all, you will enjoy this deck immensely if you are on a very tight budget or have a ton of bulk cards. Because with the most expensive card being valued at just 26 cents, bulk is exactly what this deck is comprised of. You will also enjoy this brew if you prefer a commander-centric game plan, as well as just slinging spells in mono red. However, with that said, there are some things to note whether you will dislike this deck or not. So let's address the elephant in the room here.
You're a donut! You're so stupid! You're so
With the entire deck list coming in at just under $4, as well as being mono red, please do not expect to be a strong contender in your pod. Because after all, budget brews must make sacrifices. And if we want to just make this mono red good stuff, well then it's no longer going to be a budget brew. And lastly, the only other thing that you may dislike about this deck is the cost of it. And hold up, wait a minute, you're probably like, but isn't that what's good about the deck? Well, not exactly. You see, whenever you buy a deck this cheap, even while optimizing on TCGPlayer, you'll be paying that amount tenfold on shipping alone. So this is one of those lists I recommend you build if you already have the cards. Unless you want to spend a lot of money in shipping. But just know you'll never make that money back, unless of course this video gets a lot of views and we spike the price of this deck.
That'd be something, wouldn't it? Maybe I should pick one up. We could be like Command Quarters. 100 card EDH deck for under $5. But it's not $5, isn't it?
Okay, so let's talk about the premise of the deck. Aside from being extremely cheap, we want to play spells that will continuously refill our hand, as well as spells that will bounce back to hand, ultimately leading us to 3 casts per turn, triggering our Captain Ripley Vance. And we'll begin to burn out our opponents. And to abuse this, the cards that instantly come to mind start with Vaishno Sand Sprinter, as well as Sandstalker, both of which are 3 mana casts that will return to our hand at end of turn. Glitterfang also provides the same effect, although this time at a much cheaper rates. Or we can cast a Shatterskull Charger without the kicker, or even a Magmatic Sprinter, choosing not to remove oil counters, forcing it back to hand. And what I love about these cards is not only do they all have haste, but the bounce abilities they have will protect these key pieces from board wipes, as well as ensuring our commander is able to trigger every turn. And you're probably wondering, are there other ways to do this with outside creatures? Of course there is. Other than card draw, we can utilize our commander's ability through the flashback effect mechanic, whether that's pumping her up with a Reckless Charge, wheeling our own cards with Electric Revelation, or just giving everything flashback with a Return the Past. Of course, if we are really to abuse our commander, we can always do so with a Seething Anger, pumping her up several times prior to the triggered burn thanks to the buyback ability, as well as using effects such as Get to Fire Breathing and Crown of Flames, which serve as great mana sinks into our commander and grant the ability for multiple casts at a low cost. But speaking of low costs in the deck, we have our most expensive piece, that being Etali Primal Storm, which states whenever Etali Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost, which in most cases is a surefire way to get a second trigger off Captain Ripley Vance. And of course, my favorite part about this is every single time she triggers, she gets a +1/+1 counter permanently. So yeah, that damage, it's going to be adding up. And speaking of addition, let's talk about instant speed effects in which we can use to pump up our commander. Now the best card for this is none other than Tavern Brawler, because it provides card advantage as well as a temporary power buff. However, aside from this, we're going to want to fill this deck with effects such as Claws of Valakuts, which is a 3 mana enchantment aura that reads, enchanted creature gets +1/+0 for each mountain you control and has first strike. Or perhaps we'd like to include Levon, Cultist of Tiamat, a 2 colors and 1 red mana legendary creature that states, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that spell's mana value. And of course, fill the deck with tons of other pump spells in the form of cantrips, so we're able to dig deeper with each one. Such cards may include Ambitious Assault, Blazing Crescendo, and Dragon Mantle. For a full comprehensive list, feel free to check out the Moxfield link provided down in the description below. Now, with all these instant and sorcery speed spells, we must have a way to recur them. So we have cards like Ardent Dust Speaker coming in at 4 colors in 1 red mana that states whenever Ardent Dust Speaker attacks, you may put an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. If you do, exile the top 2 cards of your library, you may play those cards this turn, which not only is a great way to get some previously casted spells back, but also a way to dig deeper within our deck. We do have a few spells with Rebound in hopes to trigger our Captain Ripley Vance, the first of which being Faithless Salvaging, which simply states discard a card, then draw a card, as well as Surreal Memoir, coming at 3 colors in 1 red mana. This sorcery speed spell reads, return an instant card at random from your graveyard to your hand, making repeatable casts that much more effective. For further redundancy, we have Get to Chronicler, which can bring back an instant or sorcery speed spell whenever it's kicked, as well as Living Lightning and Biblioplec Assistance. But even with all this recursion, as well as refilling our hands with said cantrips, this means nothing if we can't get consistent card draw. So to handle this, we have cards such as Amber Gristle Maul, coming at 3 colors in 1 red mana. This 3/3 legendary creature dwarf cleric reads, haste. Whenever Amber Gristle Maul attacks, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw a card for each player being attacked, which works beautifully if we are hellbent. As well as cards to dig deeper, whether that's through Outpost Siege, choosing cons, or through effects such as Furious Rise, stating at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until you exile another card with Furious Rise. Of course, for consistent card draw, we have pieces such as Loreseeker Stone, coming in at 6 colors, states pay 3 colors and tap Loreseeker Stone to draw 3 cards. This ability costs 1 colorless more to activate for each card in your hand, as well as other slower effects, whether that be through Howling Golem or a Magnifying Glass. Now, of course, Magnifying Glass isn't a very good card, but it is underrated here. I mean, when you think about it, most of our spells are very low mana. So in the late game, we can afford to dump 4 mana to create a clue token. These, of course, can be later sacrificed to draw cards. And of course, while we are talking about card draw, we cannot forget about the best few cards within this deck. First of which being Act of Impulse, coming in at 2 colors in 1 red mana, a sorcery speed spell that states, exile the top 3 cards of your library until end of turn. You may play those cards exiled this way. Or for a more selective choice, we can always cast an Introduction to Prophecy, this time coming in at only 3 colorless mana with the effect stating, scry 2, then draw a card. But even with these includes, nothing will be a good old Humble Defector, which at just 1 colors in 1 red mana reads, tap Humble Defector and draw 2 cards. Target opponent gains control of Humble Defector, activate only during your turn, which no matter how you look at will always be a strong effect, especially given the fact that we gain that card advantage before anyone else. And of course, if we are able to trigger our Captain Ripley Vance and she is big enough to take out a single opponent, the optimal play here is to give the Humble Defector to the opponent we plan on burning out, so no opponent even gets the card draw. Now, with nearly a quarter of this deck being nothing but instant and sorceries, as well as the ability to give everything flashback, we have 2 cards within today's list that will do heavy lifting for us aside from our Captain Ripley Vance. The first of which being obviously Gutter Snipe. Coming in at 2 colors and 1 red mana, this 2/2 creature Goblin Shaman reads, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe deals 2 damage to each opponent. So between this and our commander alone, it won't be long before we have a commanding lead. And our second synergistic card happens to be Spellgorger Weird. Once again, coming in at 2 colors and 1 red mana, this 2/2 creature Weird reads, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Spellgorger Weird, which will result in a large creature we can either defend with or apply pressure to a specific opponent. And of course, this opens up more possibilities for a Soulsfire, whether we want to use it on this or our commander. And last but not least, the 2 last cards I would like to cover within today's deck tech are 2 honorable mentions, the first of which being Drillworks Mole, a 1 colorless artifact creature mole that states, pay 2 colors and tap to put a +1/+1 counter on Drillworks Mole and put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target commander creature you control, meaning this creature can not only make itself big, but a commander of our choice, which without a doubt goes hand in hand with Captain Ripley Vance's burn ability. The second of which being an Opal Palace. As a matter of fact, this is the only land within the deck that's not a basic land. Opal Palace reads, tap to add 1 colorless mana, or we can pay 1 colorless mana and tap Opal Palace to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. If you spend this mana to cast your commander, it enters the battlefield with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game. So if we're lucky to get this out prior to its first cast, by default we'll put a +1/+1 counter on Captain Ripley Vance the minute she hits the table. And of course, if she's removed many times, thanks to Opal Palace, she'll be back in the game with a large Captain Ripley Vance in no time. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for today's deck tech. I want to see if I can start making these a little bit shorter without having to go into every single card imaginable, unless I feel I absolutely have to. Obviously, there are several cards that are questionable within today's deck, but after all, it is a budget one. Even so, I feel like this would be a great list at such an affordable price. So for those interested, the full Mox Field link will be provided down in the description below. And if you stuck around this long, I really appreciate you all, and feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section as well. But yeah, that's gonna do it for me once again. So as always, if you want to stay tuned for future videos here on the channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell down in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. So being said, my name is Patrick, host of EDH Brutality. I thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys.